LSU 17, Clemson 10. An absolute statement win for LSU. I don't think there's any two ways about it. I mean, this is a coach who had yet to win an opener since getting to Baton Rouge. This is a coach who clearly understood in the offseason that they needed to improve in a hurry, had the number one transfer haul, needed to get results immediately in order to quell the fan base, which expects more than what they've gotten as of late. To go on the road with a lot new, with so many questions lingering, this to me is a huge statement by LSU. Absolutely huge. And again, if we want to bring it back to Coach Corso, LSU was his title pick. And I saw it this morning when I was watching, and I was like, I don't know. But you see a performance like this, what I'm really left with is, for as good as they can be on offense, and for as much over the last couple seasons as it has been all about the offense steering the ship, they won this game because they answered two big questions that I had coming in about them this season. The first was defense, in particular the secondary. The secondary looked really stout.
Yes.
In this game. They mentioned it a couple times on the broadcast, but the secondary did not look like a liability against, I think, a pretty good receiver core and a pretty good quarterback. They looked lights out. And then secondly, their offensive line. Remember, we talked a lot in the preseason about the offensive line, how they had a bunch of guys drafted and they were pretty good in pass protection, but run blocking, no bueno. They outrushed Clemson in this matchup. That's not to say they went off for 200 yards. They only had a shade over 100, but they were way more effective at running the football. It's just something of a counterbalance to keep Clemson on its toes, whatever. I was really impressed by their game plan. I was really impressed by how they looked, I guess, on both sides, offensive and defensive line. It just felt to me like a much more complete product than I was expecting in week one out of them, especially on the road against a really good team in Clemson.
So they weather the two fumbles because they had more turnovers than Clemson did. They had the two fumbles, one of which I think was like inside the 15. And LSU, for the first time, I guess since Brian Kelly's first year, did a really good job at playing boring football.
Yeah.
They didn't try to do too much. Garrett Nussmeier didn't try to force a ton of balls downfield. He had a really good game against a very difficult defense by accepting boring being the actual right move tonight. There were opportunities there. The LSU receiving core and the tight ends are going to be really good this season. But in game one, with a new offensive line, in a difficult place to play, I thought Garrett Nussmeier did a really, really nice job. His numbers weren't there. The stat line wasn't there. But he was kind of hobbling around at times. He was taking hits. It's a really difficult Clemson defensive front to deal with. He hung in there in the pocket, took those hits, led them downfield when they needed to be led downfield. And again, the number here is what you mentioned. It was not only was the LSU secondary really good, up front, they didn't allow anything. No. Cade Klubnik was, especially as the game wore on, Cade Klubnik was under fire constantly from this LSU front. And Harold Perkins, I thought, was weaponized correctly. He was sort of unleashed against this Clemson front and did a great job. Like, it just made a lot of sense how LSU game planned and executed against Clemson. And I don't know what their ceiling is right now, but if you're going to Clemson week one and beating them, one, you join a bunch of other teams who have done that recently. And two, or just Georgia. Two, nobody wants this kind of speed and talent. If LSU is, they need to score 24, 28, 31 points more often than they did tonight, which was not at all. But LSU is scary if they're locked in. So good to see.
Yeah, it was good to see. And, again, not to belabor the point about the transfer portal, but they knew that they needed to come out and get results immediately.
Yep.
Just to get some of the pressure off, to go on the road at Clemson to win this kind of game. This is a gritty game. This is a game that in recent memory LSU has checked out on. They've tired out on defense. They haven't had the bodies on defense.
Or just couldn't close like last season. Yeah.
Right? I mean, remember the presser with Brian Kelly pounding the table about just his frustration in close game situations. This was another sort of monkey to get off his back, closing in one of those tight game situations. So I give them a lot of credit for what they did. They've got Florida coming up in Baton Rouge in 2 weeks. That's going to be a huge matchup. As we start getting into like the early part of October, that's when we're talking about a game against Ole Miss and South Carolina. A little bit deeper into this thing, we get Texas A&M, and then they go on the road to play Alabama, close out the year against Oklahoma. So we're going to see a lot more of LSU in some of these big game situations. But much like the Florida State conversation we had a moment ago, LSU winning a game of this magnitude, and just as a proof of concept, showing that they can be this good on defense against, again, a team that we think pretty unanimously is at least a top 10 team, top 10 caliber team in Clemson. This is pretty scary.
Yeah.
If you're somebody else in the SEC, especially since the SEC kind of feels like maybe a little bit more wide open than we expected now.
Yeah, I mean, depending on Arch's development, depending on Ty Simpson's development, sure, LSU's in a really nice place. Clemson has scored 3 points, 3 points, 7 points, and now 10 points in 4 of their last 5 openers. That's good for 5.7 points per loss in these openers against very tough opponents. And should also be noted, on that token, nobody is who they are in week 1.
No.
In week 8, right? You have to play in week 1 to get to week 2 and to get to week 6 and to get to week 11. And so, as we saw last year, Clemson was god-awful against Georgia and got better as the season went on, likely because they only had to play Georgia once. But all of these teams are going to improve, and they're just not going to look like what they do on August 30th or whatever, August 29th. And so that's important to keep in mind.